Hi guys, and welcome back to our channel. My name is Cindy Lumpkin, and today we're talking curriculum. So if you are new here, this is a video that is a part of a series of videos helping teachers and parents to start their own small schools. That's right, a free video that gives you a step-by-step process, or a series of videos that gives you a step-by-step process to start your own school. So if you are new here, please go ahead on and click up there so you can watch the very first video and you can get an understanding of how this is rolling out. One more thing, please, as you're watching this, if it's adding value to you on your journey, please give me a thumbs up. Comment below. It really does help my channel. All right, let's go ahead on and jump in.
I love this quote. If the curriculum we use to teach our children does not connect in positive ways to the culture young people bring to school, it is doomed to failure. And I think in part, this is what really brings most people to the point of wanting to start their own school. Things are not working the way that they should work in school. And a lot of times it comes back to what the curriculum is or isn't. So today, we're going to talk through a little about basic courses, state standards, grade level subjects, developing curriculum, as well as textbook learning material, learning management systems. All right, so I always want to come back to this point. I'm going to continue to show you guys this slide because this is most likely the picture you will face on your journey. You will have your frustrations. Sometimes you will be fearful. I want to prepare you for that. I want you to feel it, then move past it. If you are committed to this, no matter what hurdle you face, you have to say to yourself, I will not stop until I actually get over this hurdle. So many curriculum decisions that you have to make is going to come down to the fact of what you really want your school to look like. So do you have a certain focus or specialty in mind already? Matter of fact, this is an awesome time to go back to your mission, because if you do, most likely it is some concepts in there that would be things that you would keep in mind that will relate back to what you need to do for your curriculum. So think about it. Are you gonna have a STEM program? If so, then your curriculum needs to be strong in that area. Any of the concepts from your mission and or values that you came up with will help to inform what your curriculum looks like. So as a private school, you have tremendous freedom to develop your educational approach and your selection of courses. However, there may be state mandated subjects that must be taught, okay? And so this is going to be specific to each of you depending on what particular state that you're in. But no matter what state you're in, you're going to realize the different set of standards private schools face compared to charter schools, compared to public schools, right? And for us, that's really a good thing. So most states require you to do the basics. Of course, reading, language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. Now, those are the basic things that your educational program is going to need. And I think you guys are aware of that. State curriculum requirements. This is a guide right here. The U.S. Department guide will help you to determine exactly what is required of you for your particular state. So I'm actually going to send you the link to this in your homework assignment for this particular lesson. This is called the State Regulation of Private Schools. And this is their most up-to-date copy. And what it is, it's a document that at a high level, at least they say it's a high level, because they want it to be a starting point. But it really goes through every state and tell you kind of what that state's rules and laws are. So you're going to, in your homework time, you're going to use this document. You're going to go to your state, But for right now, I'm going to go to Georgia, okay? So we're going to go to page 57. All right, here we go. So accreditation, registration, licensing, and approval. So it just depends on, once again, what type of language your state uses. But for the state of Georgia, as you can see, it has no requirements for accreditation. Well, what does that mean? It means that somebody can open up a school here in the state of Georgia, and you are not required to have an accrediting body come in and certify your program. Once again, let me kind of take a step back. You can start a business and say that you are a school, and there are no other requirements. Like, you don't have to get accredited, okay? However, you can see right here, it says, well, to qualify for participation in Georgia Special Needs Scholarship, that's something that I participate in, or Georgia Private School Tax Credit, that's something that I need to participate in, and that I'm gonna really work harder in the coming years to get businesses to participate in this program for my school. And we'll talk about that in our funding lesson. But in order to get benefit from these types of things, then you are gonna have to seek accreditation. So there are no registration requirements. So I do not have to call the State Board of Education and say, hey, I exist. There is no particular licensing outside of, a business license, which everybody needs to do business in general in a city or a state. Once again, no licensing. There is nobody that you have to ask for approval for, okay? When it comes to the people that you hire, as well as yourself, teacher certification is not required. However, a participating private school that enrolls students under, once again, the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship. So if your state has this particular program, some of you, they might call it a voucher. Other people use the word scholarship. Georgia tries to have its cake and eat it too. They want it to stay away from the term voucher, and that's why they use scholarship. But it's still the same thing. It's parents of or students who have disabilities, IEPs, and have been served in the public education system for at least 1 year. They have a certain amount of money budgeted to them based upon that IEP. And if their parent feels as if that school is not serving them, they can pull their child and pull their special education money to attend a private school or a charter school or other public school that will accept them. So, but yeah, no teacher certification. Here are some requirements. I believe it's the state of Texas, and Marta, you'll find this out when you look up your information. But I want to say the state of Texas doesn't even have a length of school year, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of those states that I was just reading something on, and but they don't have a 180-day rule. However, but the state of Georgia, we do have a 180-day rule that we have to abide by. And that's the same rule that the charter and public schools have to adhere to. And though the school day consisting of 4.5 school hours. So that's important too. So when you are talking about your educational program or strategizing and having to hire people or what you're doing for certain times, you only, or at least for us, but it's probably similar for other states, we only have to do 180 days, and we only have to do it for 4.5 hours. All right, so here's some other things right here about attendance and so forth. We are supposed to report things to our district, about attendance, and so forth of the students that we are serving them. Let's get down here to curriculum. Private schools must provide a basic academic educational program that includes reading, language arts, mathematics, social studies, and science. And so, once again, those other electives are just that. Those are things that you do not per se have to offer, but we're going to talk about those things. Reason why you should. It'll talk about the health and safety requirements. Now, this is something that you really need to pay attention to, because for me, it was something that was a Achilles heel in the beginning. Private school buildings must meet all health and safety standards established under state law and local ordinance. So if, like, we have cities and counties here, if my school is in a particular county, then that particular county have zoning rules. So let's get down to textbooks. This is where a lot of people have questions, or at least they ask me, they're like, what do I have to teach? What do you have to use? Absolutely nothing if you don't want to. Okay. Therefore, once again, and this is the state of Georgia, but I also want you to know that I'm almost positive this is going to be the same in every state. There is no state policy at this time on what textbooks you choose to use to work with your students. You do not have to participate in state testing. If you're not a special educator, but you still want to work with students who have IEPs, you don't have to worry about the legalities of an IEP. When a parent chooses to pull their child out of public schools, they are basically giving up the IEP as they know it. Sometimes, I have to really kind of talk to my parents because they don't understand what that means, at least for me. I have to tell them, I am a school. My whole school is an IEP, okay? So everything that, I ain't gonna say everything, academically, what's in your child's IEP, I am going to be working on those things in my school. All the accommodations that's inherent in who we are as a school. You may not be so much if you're not doing a special needs schools, but you need to be able to explain to parents that you're not obligated to follow the school's IEP. However, the academic portions, hopefully you are definitely, going to make sure, whatever the issue is, that you are working on those things. Tax exemption, sales of tangible personal property and services used exclusively for educational purposes by bona fide private schools that have been approved by tax exemptions are tax exempt from taxation. So that means if you have like a 501c3, then you can get your sales tax exemption from your particular state. So when I go to Walmart, I have a little card and I don't have to pay sales tax. Now, I do want to ask you guys, are you kind of surprised at the lack of regulation? I guess that's the only thing that I can say that's out there. Like, you can open up a model school of academy or models academy, and really there's not a lot of hoops that you have to jump through, at least by the state of Georgia standards, right? Each of you have to look up your own, and that link is going to be provided for you in your homework. As I alluded to earlier, you will want to do more than the basics if you're planning on getting accredited, all right? Because your accrediting agency is going to have a whole slew of other things that's going to make you scratch your head. But if you are someone who will be trying to benefit from some of the programs your state may have to offer, then you would want to seek that accreditation. If you are going to be eventually issuing diplomas, you want to do more than just the basics, because you want your students to be able to take your high school diploma and still go on to trade schools, still go on to 4-year schools. So you're going to have to do more than the basics if you're going to do a high school program and issue out diplomas. Sending students to college, you want to make sure that they have the right courses on their transcript. And if not, it will make it very difficult for them to get enrolled in college. And of course, if you have parent expectation, that's going to just depends on who you're serving, what your program is, and the expectation that you have. So let's talk about grade levels and subjects. You will want to create a course catalog with course names and descriptions. And what I mean by course catalog is just a listing of the classes that you're offering and a brief description of what can be expected. Now, I will say this is probably more important at the high school level than it is at elementary and middle, but I will encourage you to still do it, because I think it will help you build trust with your parents. It'll help you to be able to say, in the 3rd grade, these are some of the high level things that we focus on. And then as we continue and progress 4th grade, whatever those things are. And I'm going to give you kind of an example of what I have and what I'm going to be updating this year too. It's good to go ahead on and list what types of elective classes. And you might think like, oh my God, it feels like a big deal when you're starting off small, right? It's like, what elective can I offer? I promise you, it is not that big of a deal. Study skills class, that is an elective. Speech class, that is an elective. There's so many electives that you could teach. What else? I don't do anything like construction. However, I provide experiences, and hopefully we can kind of get into more about how that looks for me, because obviously I'm not a contractor and I can't afford to hire someone. So instead of having what I call an elective class, I actually create experiences for my students. But those electives should tie back to your mission. So once again, if your mission has to do with foreign language immersion, then obviously some of your electives might be connected to foreign languages or, whatever that looks like. So, but once again, you can see how this builds on each other, because whatever your mission is, that is going to help to you determine what your classes look like. When we're talking about state standards are different from curriculum. And you guys may know this, but I felt like I needed to state this, because another question I'm asked all the time is about state standards. And in the private schools, a lot of people, it's two things. People be like, private schools aren't teaching the standards. Well, they are teaching the standards for the most part, but it's really not looked at the same way. And I think that's because people also really don't understand the difference between standards and a curriculum. Standards tells you what your child is expected to learn. That's the first thing, right? It just gives you this high level picture of what the goal is for your child. However, curriculum is the content that is used to teach, to help your child meet whatever that standard or whatever that goal of learning is. Does that make sense? The good part about that is most textbooks, most learning material is going to connect back to the standards in some shape or form. Now, depending on what textbook depending on what type of learning material. Maybe it will not cover every single standard there is. But once again, I think that is one of the reasons that tie back into why people want to get out of the public schools, because like they're listing all of these goals of what they're saying they want children to learn. But the truth of the matter is, are they really learning those things? And I am the type of person, like, I don't fake the funk, okay? Like, I tell my parents all the time, that looks great. But when your child is in the 10th grade, reading on the 3rd grade level, stop trying to hold them to some standard. And why even make me feel like I got to teach them something that they are really not at a point to access the way that it is written, if that makes sense. Okay, so when we're talking about curriculum, we're talking about your textbooks, and the language that I use with my parents is that we provide access to standards, but no, do I write them on my board? Do I beat the people I work with over the head? No, but the things that we're working on with your child eventually ties back to standards. Because for me, it's about helping our children to learn how to read, helping them to learn how to write, right? At generally a basic level, and then trying to bring them as close to grade level, if not grade level, just depending on what each of their abilities are. But when you're talking about textbooks, once again, you guys don't have to get stuff from the same things that the school has been using. Remember, at least for the state of Georgia, there's no regulation on what textbooks to use, what learning materials to use. So over the course of me having my school, the way that I got my books and so forth would be reaching out to certain companies that I would be interested, in their material. And sometimes they'll send you free samples. Now, I did not put a lot of my money into the same types of textbooks public schools use, because they're extremely expensive. But for some that I really, really love, I would reach out to them and say, hey, I am a private school. We are looking at your books. We were wondering, do you have any samples to send out? And that would help me, because once again, a lot of what's in those books tie back to standards, even though it may not always be explicit when you are going through the book. And I guess the difference is there, we don't have a scope and sequence unless you create it yourself. I always considered, or I used textbooks. So I got books from Amazon. I got books from eBay. I got books from other schools. So they throw those things out. And, even some of my friends, I'd be like, hey, y'all using XYZ, go to the book room. But that's only if you have a good friend. I also use homeschool textbooks. Now, what I realized was the homeschool books, man, sometimes, honestly, for me, particularly with the students that I'm working with, they provided me more of what I needed, with being able to expose my kids who weren't on grade level, but still exposing them to things that their peers in gen ed would have been learning in public schools, if that makes sense. And guess what? The price is totally not comparable. Like, it's just ridiculous once you see how much some of these homeschool people are paying for books, and then what the publishing companies are making you pay. You can consider some web-based platforms. I use ReadWorks a lot. I love ReadWorks. ReadWorks makes life so easy for me. I also use some Scholastic Read 180, I believe, books. I love that program. Obviously, the program is about $30,000, so I can't have the whole thing, but there are some schools or people who get these books and they sell them online on Amazon, and I get those. And so that's kind of how I provide my reading material, is through that, as well as chapter books, as well as ReadWorks. I am going to show you guys Triumph's Way. And what I call Triumph's Way is basically my curriculum, how I do stuff. So you may want to consider creating something like this. And it's basically a one pager here of, I guess, my curriculum, the content that I use to deliver instruction. And it's a focus too, not only on what we teach, but how we teach it. And that's important to me because my students, being students with learning disabilities, there is a particular way that those in my space know learning has to occur in order for students to actually learn, right? So here's my focus. So in reading, I focus on phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And I'm going to tell you what I used to teach some of those things later. Math, we have a focus on conceptual understanding, problem solving, computation, mental math, explicit vocabulary instruction. And that's important, once again, for me, because language in general is more difficult for my students. So I try to create language in every subject. We want to pull out that vocabulary. We want to explicitly show them what it is and how it connects to other things, because it also builds, background knowledge. So writing, our focus is the structure of language, grammar, and punctuation, and then the writing process. History and science. Once again, this is just for me. You kind of have to determine, this for yourself. It's just my personal opinion. When you have a child who is sufficiently behind, I don't want to say science and history isn't important, because it is extremely important, but I don't place as much importance on it, because I feel like when I am successful in teaching my students to decode and improving their comprehension, all of the science and history is gonna come, right? But we still want to use those subjects to help them to build background knowledge, which is important. So these subjects are taught to expose students to concepts that have real world personal connections with exposure to Common Core. You can see my language again. I don't commit to following the standards, right? But because so many parents don't really understand, their worry is, oh, are you teaching standards? So just to kind of help satisfy them, in which it is true, like the textbooks we still use are generally aligned with standards, but I do not profess to go looking up standards and making sure that we touch on every last one of them. Because why? Just for my mission and my philosophy, I want your child to learn how to read and write. And when they learn how to read and write, all the other blocks can fall into place. If they don't have that ability to really get to that point where they're strong reading and writing, what does the other stuff matter anyway? That's just me. So also we work on growth mindset, and I actually have a book that I use that helps to talk about resiliency. It helps them to set goals and so forth. It's really neat. If you're interested in it, just let me know. It says how we teach. We teach direct, explicit, systematic instruction, multisensory, diagnostic teaching, immersive language. So that is how we do it. We really do try to make sure things are accessible through senses, and not just accessible through their senses, but using their sentence simultaneously. We do go block by block. So it is direct instruction. It is systematic. And a lot of times people feel that type of teaching is very boring, and it can be if you're not the type of instructor who can make learning fun. So I like to think, I make it fun. But one of the things, honestly, that I've also learned is that my kids love this way of learning, because many of them come to me as older kids. I'm talking about like 13, 14 years old, still not being able to read, or reading on a second and third grade level. And so when they start to see success, they want more of it. And so they're engaged, and it really becomes what we want from learners, right? That they're so engaged and that they're participating in the learning process. So for me, there has not been any issues. Now, what we use to teach it, my main sources only. So, once again, even in public schools, we pull from a variety of ways, even though you guys may have a standard textbook. But Wordly Wise 3000, that's what I use to teach vocabulary. ReadWorks, that is what I use to help with oral reading, comprehension. And I will say, Wordly Wise also still helps with oral reading as well as comprehension, because each set of vocabulary words also comes with like a little article that they read about, which connects with every other type of subject. So we learn things about history, we learn things as with science as well. Once again, because I am a special education program, we have the Barton reading system. We also have some Wilson material that we use. And this is what we use to teach phonics. Math UC. This is a program that's sold through homeschool, but I absolutely love it. And if you're going to be starting out having to teach a lot of this yourself, or if you feel like you want to help handicap your instructor, they might not be the strongest. But I mean, if you start out at the elementary school level, it may not, be a big deal. But as you go up and having to do like algebra and geometry and all of that stuff, I chose Matthew C. One, because it is K through 12, right? And it's multi-sensory, so they try to make it in such a way that you are being able to use your senses. But the other thing is that they actually do video demonstrations of each lesson. I try to stay away from math, but if I had to, I could do algebra. There would be a lot of learning that I would have to do myself. But I could do it. And having that video of watching that instructor actually teach the lesson, and then having all of the resources for the kids would be helpful. So that's kind of why I liked it. And then we have Triumph's organization and system. So a lot of my kids have executive function issues. So we teach notebooks, keeping your notebooks and keeping them separated and divided and all of that good stuff. So learning management systems are going to be a part of what you also going to be researching. And I'm sure some of you are very familiar, or probably all of you are very familiar with Google Classroom and Canvas. And it's lots of them, right? I should put up there for myself Zoom, because that's what we use. But my teacher also had Google Classroom as well that she used. I did not use Google Classroom. I can be a dinosaur sometimes. I'm thinking about making a bigger effort next year to use it in my class, but we shall see. But learning management systems is just basically these software tools that you use to be able to engage with students, to be able to assign homework or assign activities. You can put presentations, and you guys know what they are, right? So I'm not going to really go all into that, but that is definitely something that you want to think about up front, especially if you are going to be hiring other people. What is it that you expect from them? Do you guys want to follow something that is that's going to be the same across the board? Or, if you allow your teacher to do something different. Like I said, I use Zoom, but that had its limitations, right? Like it did the get on, I can use the whiteboard and all of that good stuff, but it really was no place for the kids to go and sign into that house my lessons or my activities and so forth. Whereas my teacher, for the most part, chose to use the Google Classroom, and even sometimes she used the Google Hangout. Although that a part of Google Classrooms is not as user-friendly as the Zoom, or she had, problems with it here and there, and Zoom was much better. So she toggled between the two, but she absolutely did use Google Classroom, and they were able to, go sign in and access their stuff. All right, so we also need to talk about school administration software. All right, so I will tell you, I am a dinosaur. But I would say look into school administration software. A lot of times, or in the beginning, I did not take this part seriously because I didn't want to pay anybody money, right? And I did start out using one. And what you will see, I looked up these. A lot of these have free versions, right? So this is a part of your homework. Y'all can go, and there's a lot more of them out there. I found an article that gave me like some of the top ones. And so I'm really looking at Cluster for next year. But you guys, I want y'all to research all of these and to be able to tell me which one you're liking, for what reason, and so forth. But I am looking at Cluster right now because Cluster is kind of like an all-in-one. Not only is it a school administration software, but it's a student learning management piece of equipment or software as well. So it's all in one. And when you talk about school administration, what we're talking about too, we're talking about being able to access teachers too. We're talking about being able to build schedules, right? We're also talking about, which is important, transcripts, right? Especially if you are going to be doing high school, and even, not high school. I mean, it's easier to produce something for elementary and middle school, but high school gets to be a little bit tricky. And when I say I'm a dinosaur, my transcripts have been in Excel. I had my husband to build that for me. And it has worked well until they graduate. And then they come back and they say, oh, can I have a copy, right? And so it's like, oh, where did I save that at? So that's why now I'm kicking myself in the butt, because I have to enter these things manually in an Excel spreadsheet. Whereas if I had a school administration software, it would be so much easier to enter classes once and then build a student's transcript as they go. So this is why I would say it is very important, even if you're starting out with a free one. And like I said, I did start out with a free version. It just so happens that the free version I used, they discontinued. And then it was just not in me to really go back and look for another one because I was so busy in other things. But if I had it to go back and do all over again, when they discontinued that one, I would have found another one so that the process of issuing report cards and keeping up with transcripts were much easier than what I'm using now. And I will still give you guys copies of that so that you can see if you are going to be a little dinosaur like me, which it really doesn't matter. You definitely can. And I have had no problems with colleges as long as that you have the correct classes up there. I did have, I'm trying to think, was it a college or another high school? I think it was. And because too, in Georgia, I think they went from saying algebra 1 to math this or some other different name. And they really wanted me to give a description of what the course was so they could compare it to whatever their course was. And it turned out to be fine, but I had to get that description. And once it still coincided with algebra, they gave the student their algebra credit. So even though I am a bit of a dinosaur, the other schools do accept it. And sometimes they might be like, okay, what's this? Who is this? And then I'd be like, here's my papers. You better leave me alone and take this stuff and get this kid his glasses or whatever. So it still worked out. But I am stepping it up next year. I am going to use a school administration software like Cluster. And I like Cluster too because you can also accept payment. So that's another thing that you would have to think about. But you can accept payments. And I do believe that parents can be able to log in as well.
All right, guys, so that is all for right now. Now, I will say this. Some of the tools that I now use since using the tools or recommended some of the things that I did, I am using some other things. I am still kind of researching and seeing how they work and seeing if I'm going to be switching over and so forth. But when I do, and if it's something that I can recommend, I promise you that I will come back and do a video. Now, with all things, I also tell people to always do your own research so you can choose those things that work best for you. All right, then, have a great one.